you've done to me. Everything we are and used to be is buried and gone. Now it's my turn to speak.
The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
Welcome to Entitled to Overcome, Exploring Solutions for Life Today, a presentation of Take 12 Recovery Radio. And now, here are your co-hosts, Dave Fleming and the Monty'man.
Holy cow. Welcome to Entitled to Overcome, Solutions for Life Today with Dave Fleming. Hey there.
And the Monty'man.
Monty.
So Denver brought in this cowbell. We had a couple other ones, but he sold them at his whatever that thing is he does down in Eugene. Whatever they do in Eugene.
Dark Cave of Wonders.
Yeah, he goes, I sell leather goods and dog collars. And I went, all right, we'll just stop there. So if you have a dog and you like a dog collar, he does sell nice dog collars. If you have a dog.
Belts, hats.
Yeah, all sorts of whips.
Various.
Sundries of.
Leather.
So for those of you who are wondering who Denver is, if you haven't listened to the Monday show, Denver is one of the co-hosts on the Monday show. Denver Wolf, E. Wolf spelled with an E. The topic this week is no pain, no gain. And the question posed is, did your life change after doing a fifth step? If so, how and with whom did you do it? So it's a three-part question, right, Dave? All three parts.
You gotta be detailed, because otherwise you'll get a yes or no answer, right?
Yeah. So some people posted yes.
Gotta ask an open-ended question.
Some people posted definitely. And
yeah. Some people will answer an open-ended question with one word.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're going to be addressing that. Here in a second. But of course, we know it's time for this as the clock ticks away.
Time is marching on.
What time is it?
It's time for Dave and Monty's Icebreaker.
That's right.
Can't you get any of it in the cup?
No, it all spills out.
Oh.
Grand Junction, Colorado. Colorado University is offering to reprint, this is great, up to 9,200 diplomas after the outgoing editor of the school newspaper found a big typo. Oops. Alec Williams was checking to make sure his name was spelled correctly on the Colorado Mesa University diploma when he noticed it said Court of Trustees instead of Board of Trustees in Old English font. So he was a guy who was paying attention to detail, Dave.
It's how many did they print before someone noticed?
Well, Williams told the Daily Sentinel he laughed, but then got frustrated because he had $30,000 in student loans and a diploma with a typo. So he wasn't happy. I get it.
Right?
Right. CMU President Tim Foster says the university is sending corrected diplomas to 2018 graduates and will offer them to graduates as far back as 2012. They've been printing these wrong.
Wow.
The cost $5 each, so the university could spend nearly $46,000 because of one letter. Don't. Oh, man. And so Tim Foster, the president,
Can't make this stuff up.
he says, we design them ourselves. We don't have a print shop do them, so it's on us.
And is the person that's actually doing it a college graduate?
Yeah,
Do they know how to
maybe
spell?
not. Maybe
Do
not.
they know how to read?
Oh, boy.
That's funny.
Well, in Glen Burnie, Maryland, what a name of a town, Glen Burnie.
Glen Burnie. He was a nice guy.
Wasn't he?
Yeah.
He really, I miss that guy. A 22-year-old man who went for his driver's test left in handcuffs after the examiner became suspicious about a certain odor emanating from the car. News outlets report the examiner alerted a trooper at the Motor Vehicles Administration office who searched the car. A Maryland State Police report says the search found nearly a pound of marijuana, a scale, more than $15,000 in cash, and a handgun loaded with a 30-round magazine. Reginald D. Wooding Jr. of Baltimore did not get his driver's license on Monday, but he did get arrested on multiple counts. It's unclear whether he has a lawyer. I'm going to go get my driver's test, dude.
Dude, where's my car?
Yeah. Marijuana doesn't have any effect on people. No, none whatsoever. Stanford, here's our last one. Stanford, Florida. Speaking of moo-moos, a herd of 16 moo-moos, cows, that is, helped police officers in Florida corral a fleeing suspect who bailed out of a car and ran through a pasture. Of course, this would be from Florida. A Seminole County Sheriff's helicopter captured the Sunday night incident on video. As the crew gave play-by-play to officers on the ground, a crew member offered this nugget to pursuing officers, quote, if you see a large group of cows, they're literally following her, end quote. The cows eventually ran Jennifer Ann Kaufman into a fence where police were waiting to arrest her. An arrest report shows the car Kaufman was in crashed during a police pursuit. A second suspect was captured by a canine unit. Kaufman is being held on $4,500 bond. Charges against her include resisting an officer, drug possession, and causing cows to be disturbed.
A stampede.
So,
You've heard of cows, haven't you?
so, if you're running from the police and you see a herd of cows, go the other way. Because cows take a bite out of crime, Dave. Oh, my gosh. All right, we're going to be back right after this little message. Don't go away. Dun, dun.
Overcome.
Hey, did you know that September is officially National Recovery Month? That's right. So I want you to join us on September 7th at Marion Square Park in Salem, Oregon from 2 to 7 p.m. Why? Well, it's Hands Across the Bridge. The theme, building bridges, and the admission is free. Come join the celebration. We're going to have a DJ, we're going to have live music, food, games, and a whole lot more. This is the 12th annual Hands Across the Bridge, and during the main event, attendees will walk over the Marion Street Bridge to honor those in recovery and to remember those lost to addictions and mental health challenges in the past year. When? Hands Across the Bridge, Building Bridges, September 7th, Marion Square Park in Salem from 2 to 7 p.m. Remember, the admission is free, and there's going to be a whole lot of fun and a whole lot of building bridges. 2018 Hands Across the Bridge is organized by Marion Polk Peer Coalition and sponsored in part by Take 12 Recovery Radio.
And now, back to more Solutions for Life today with Dave Fleming and the Monty'man.
Yes, indeed. We do have some solutions for life today. And Dave Fleming has once again come up with a stellar topic, no pain, no gain. This is a phrase that has been used for years by athletes and weightlifters and all that kind of stuff. Well, don't you know that working a thorough recovery program can be weighty? And
There can be some pain involved.
there can be some pain involved. And if you're not willing to do, well, first of all, let me preface this by saying, if I want to approach something to either improve my life or fix a situation or whatever, I'm going to search out the method that has worked the best for the longest. Why not?
What about the easier, softer way?
Well, that can be painful too, eventually. And I will cop to it. I have been one of those in the past that thought, well, maybe if I did it my way, a little easier, a little softer, maybe I can get through this and come out looking and smelling like a rose. It never happened. I'd always either have to go back and do it right, or I paid the consequences.
And wash off that stench.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's an
'Cause
old
that ain't roses.
there's a saying about do it right the first time. Measure twice, cut once.
Yep.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
That's carpentry.
Right.
Rule.
Bill W., the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, spoke a lot in construction terms. He talked about keystones. He talked about building. He talked about construction and so forth. So he understood that stuff. He was also very savvy when it comes to numbers and math and that kind of thing. So he understood the importance of reading directions. And he himself had copped to the fact that he didn't always do that. But within
So the 12 steps are like a blueprint,
yeah,
if you will.
yeah, not a blueprint for printing guns on your 3D printer
Or building a house,
or building a
but recovery.
but for recovery. So you came up with the topic, no pain, no gain, and you asked the question, did your life change after doing a fifth step? If so, how and with whom did you do it? So for those of you who may not know, the fifth step, if you're following directions, follows the fourth step, which is a personal inventory that goes into several categories of your life: resentment, fear, sex harms, that kind of thing. And then step 5 is what, Dave? Talk to us. Take us from this point.
Well, step 5 is about, sharing it with somebody else.
Yeah.
It's about confession, with another human being. Sometimes we get caught on that because it's like, well, why do I need to go and tell somebody? God already knows.
Yeah, we hear that all the time.
Right? I really don't want to talk about it with somebody else.
Yeah.
I know when I did my first one, I left a bunch of stuff out intentionally.
Was it
because it wasn't that? I mean, it was like, I don't need to. Why do I need to share that? It's like none of their business.
Was shame part of that?
Probably.
Maybe some fear.
It was. I don't know what was tied up into it at the time. It was one of those. It was one of it was one of those incidences. The thing that comes to my mind that did when you're younger and you're under the influence of chemicals, and
right.
Otherwise, you would never intentionally done anything like that, and
right.
So it's like, well, I don't really need to talk about it.
Yeah, I was high. I don't really need to go there. I wouldn't do that now.
It was a one-time thing,
right.
But my second time through, as the book says, do a searching and fearless moral inventory.
Sure.
So since I didn't do that the first time, I still had to do my fourth step. I mean, that's how I interpret the book.
Right.
Right? The directions.
Right.
The blueprint. So that's what I did. And I did it in a way that everything that I can remember that comes to my mind, I'm going to put it on paper. Now, I'm not going to take, I'm not going to take 6 months or a year or whatever it is. I probably took a week and got out everything that came to my mind. I mean, why do I need to waste any more time?
Right.
I want to start this process, and I'd already had some experience with the step work, and so I know if there's something that comes up, then I just I do a 10-step. So even if I'm not even on step 10 yet, I'm going to do that because I know what the directions are. Mm-hmm. I take my inventory every day. I'm not going to go back and do another 4-step.
Right.
There's a lot of people that I've heard a lot of people doing, 3 and 4 and 5 and 10, and I'm doing one once a year or whatever. And if that's what you need to do, more power to you. I don't feel like I need to do that because that's not what the directions say.
Right. And in fact, and we talked about that before the show. The big book says, that we come to a point where we intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. So all these things, before I ever did step 1 through 12, I had never done step 1 through 12, obviously, before I did it. So now that I've done it, and if I've been taken through it correctly with the book, know how to follow the instructions, then I can intuitively know how to deal with things when it comes up to maybe some behaviors that I shouldn't have displayed, some knee-jerk reactions, conflicts with other people, a lack of forgiveness, all that stuff.
Right.
I can learn to apply those principles without having to go back and do 1 through 12 again.
Right.
I don't get that either, but I do know people that do it.
It's kind of like, we talked about some of the programs akin to being in kindergarten.
Right.
Well, I don't want to be in kindergarten for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and it's been actually by the founders. They call it spiritual kindergarten.
Yeah. I want to grow. I want to,
right.
Do something different. I want to move on. I don't want to be stuck in this groove that I'm wearing down.
Well, I think this comes from people misunderstanding and thinking that 10, 11, and 12 are maintenance steps. They're continuing to grow steps.
Well, they are maintenance steps, but that's part of the growth process. While you're doing the maintenance, you're also growing in that.
Right. You're not just maintaining. You're moving forward.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So
then, okay. So, and that, kind of goes into the 5th step. Well, the first time like I said, I left, I probably left a few things out, but there was one thing in particular that I left out that I didn't think it was any big deal. It's not anybody's business. It's not, it's not going to change the world. It's not going to make my life any different. That's what I thought at the time. So I went in and I saw, they section out of a time, and you can be in there for 5 hours if you want to, and do your 5th step with a pastor, person of the clergy. So they're bound, basically they're bound by law that confidentiality.
Sure.
And so I felt good about that, but I also felt some burden because I knew afterwards that even though I went through that process, afterwards I felt like there was still some heaviness, and I couldn't figure out why. I thought, well, okay, that wasn't that was okay, being able to talk about stuff, but it wasn't all that helpful. I mean, I don't feel any different, nothing. I mean, it wasn't really anything else that had changed. And so when I left there, I pretty much went back to doing what I was doing before. So not a whole lot had changed, even though some of the stuff that I talked about was a little bit painful, but it wasn't really any big deal.
Right.
The most painful part of it is actually having to go and follow the process and go and tell somebody. That was probably the hardest part. I mean, I can write stuff down. I can put it in code so no one can tell what it is. And then we go and, at the time, I think we burned it. They stopped doing that. Now you get a shredder. But that was kind of the rituals. We burned our 4th step. We went and told somebody. After we told somebody, then we burned it. So anyway, fast forward to my last treatment. I had a spiritual awakening. the only thing you had to change is everything, all that stuff that we've talked about.
Yeah.
All that came into play. And so I had some sobriety under my belt, and my head was clear. I was following direction. All the self-help books that I brought with me to treatment, I was instructed not to touch them. So I put them on my shelf that was on the top of my desk. So I had to look at them and practice following direction. So I didn't take them home. I didn't send them home. I left them there.
And the directions was you're not to read those.
Correct.
Right.
Because that's what I've done my whole life.
Gotcha.
And the only thing you need to do is change everything.
Right.
So that's so as I do my 4-step, I basically put down everything that I could think of at the time. Then I went in to go do my 5th step, and I was kind of excited about the whole process because here I'm being totally honest. I'm in acceptance. I'm a changed person. God's removed the obsession. So I'm pretty fired up. I go to do my 5th step, and the guy that's normally there,
right,
is on vacation that week. And I'm like,
yeah, I hear you.
Okay. And then I walk in, and who's there? But a female pastor. And I was like, yeah, I don't really want to do this now. But in that split second, I also said, the only thing you got to change is everything. So let's
another
do
thing.
it.
Yeah.
If you can get through this, you can get through anything. So I did. The counselor I had this time told me to do a few things that I wasn't told to do, or I don't remember being told to do it.
Right.
Okay. So she basically told me to follow directions, right? Do 6 and 7.
Yeah.
Right afterwards.
Keep moving. Yeah.
Yeah. Do the whole thing, about, and 5, 6, and 7, about not only confessing to someone else, but also to yourself. So I literally went into the bathroom and read my 4-step to myself while I was looking in the mirror.
Wow.
So I literally, was doing that. I felt like that was part of that action step.
Sure.
And then afterwards, I went into the meditation room and prayed and, asked God to help me, to be ready to remove these defects. And a lot of that is just the willingness and being ready to do that. And so it felt like this huge weight was lifted off my shoulder, like this whole I felt that kind of already before I got there because some things that happened in my life that basically, they talk about that rock, that part about you get rocketed into the fourth dimension.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of was already
experiencing some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of just following the directions and going through the process. It was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It wasn't really difficult because I was already ready to go, and I'd already seen some things happen in my life that if I'm completely honest and I'm following direction and doing the next right thing, whatever that is, that good things happen. I already had some experience in that the month before I actually got to treatment. So I was in a good spot. So about probably a few months later, I was in a class, and this a couple things came up that God revealed to me that you didn't do this one again. So I set up an appointment with the pastor that was leading the class and my pastor from the church that I work with on a regular basis, and basically I did a 10th step, but with someone else there. So kind of a modified version of a 5th and 10th step. So I was, I just felt that was the best way for me to do it at the time.
Yeah.
And so as I do that, then I get in got me in the habit of making sure that I do that step 10 work on a daily basis, taking a log or
right. Journaling and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
So the reason why this this actual topic stood out to me in some of my meditation is the reading basically goes, it talks about a guy going and doing his fifth step and unloading all the burdens of, the guilt and the sex misconduct, robbery, real destruction of property, and on and on and on. But then he got done with that, and the directions were basically to go and do a sixth step, right?
Yeah.
Sixth and seventh. So after doing the fifth step, the suggestion was that he take time to say the seventh step prayer, asking God to take the offending stuff of his old life away. So he didn't do that. He went home and turned the TV on.
So he didn't follow directions.
He didn't follow directions. And so he shortly after went back to drinking.
Isn't that interesting how that works? By simply not following the directions of a person that you might have gone to for direction, but you're not following directions.
Right.
Aren't we a interesting lot of people?
Well, and I hear about it all the time about how desperate I am to get this.
Right.
This time. Right. Because
Right.
most of the people that I work with, they've done it many, many times. And they're like, okay, I get it now. I want to get it this time. What do I need to do differently? And basically, I say you follow direction, and we can sit down and put a plan together. But if you don't follow it, it's not going to work.
Yeah. So if you're drowning, right, and you can hear the guy on the shore say, "Grab the buoy," right, and you say, "I want to grab the buoy," but then you don't grab the buoy.
Right.
You're going to drown. So, but that's not going to happen. You are going to grab instinctively. You're going to grab the buoy, and that's how you have to approach your recovery. And that's why we talk about you have to have the desperation of a drowning man, because a drowning man, he's grabbing it. There's no more time. This is it.
And I think some get tunnel vision when they start feeling good. Things are going well. Maybe they're getting into the Word, and they're putting everything into the relationship with God, which is great. But they're losing sight of the big picture.
Yeah.
They get into that. I forget what they call it, but kind of this. You start getting to the religiosity.
Oh, spiritual bypass.
Spiritual bypass. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And so it's. For instance, I was talking with this guy, and we were doing a workshop on communication skills. Mm-hmm. And what was the subject? We're doing I statements, basically, and how those come into play with communication.
Right.
And in the beginning of the group, we do like a meditation and process it. He got up and went into the restroom, and then he comes back out. And then we were all having a discussion, and I asked him what his thoughts were, and he says, "Communication is the least of my worries."
Really? It's interesting.
And I said, "Can you explain that?" And he says, "Well, I'm focusing my entire life on my relationship with Jesus Christ, which again is great,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But he's got his blinders on because he's not seeing the big picture that God is in everything.
Yeah.
God helps us by helping us work on the things that we need to work on. And communication is part of every single thing that we do.
Absolutely.
Even the relationship with Jesus, we have to learn how that communication.
Prayer and meditation is all communication. Ooh, that rhymes.
Right.
Yeah, prayer and meditation is about communication. Oh, man, I should be a rapper.
Right.
I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to follow directions.
So, I mean, my point is that we got to be careful that we don't do the spiritual bypassing and get stuck with this tunnel vision. I had another conversation with a gentleman today. He's like, I'm not gonna go to meetings. I'm just gonna go to church. or I'm going to go to Celebrate Recovery, and that's it. I said, well, what if you end up having to work on that day or those days, and you have to switch up your schedule? You got to have a backup plan, and you got to look at, the 12 steps, all these groups. They come right out of the Bible.
Yep.
You got to take the people out of it. You got to look at what the information is. It's just like in the Bible. You got to read the book yourself.
Amen.
And then find someone who actually has done it and can guide you. Because and besides that, if we're all hanging out with a bunch of healthy people sharing the 12 steps, how are we helping our brother down the street, right? Isn't our mandate to go out and help others?
Which is key in recovery.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we're with all the people that are
at the Bless Me service on Sunday morning,
I mean, there's just as many sick people in church as there is in 12-step groups.
But Sunday morning worship and sermon time usually isn't the time for digging deep into your recovery issues. That usually not the time. So what I've noticed because I know several people that say, I'm just going to go celebrate recovery. Right. The people that say that never get involved in the step writing workshops that CR offers. They never work with a sponsor in CR. They never dig deep. They never go through the step process. They just go to celebrate recovery.
Or they do the spiritual bypass.
So every
time you talk to them, they start quoting scriptures, but their life is falling apart.
Or I'll just go to AA meetings. And so they drink bad coffee and talk about their day. They never get a sponsor. They never work the steps. They never do any of that because they think that meetings are going to keep them sober.
Yeah, that was a part of this guy's...
Or I should say just going to meetings.
Why one of the reasons why he's upset is because people are just... You need to just go to meetings. You need to just go to meetings every day. I'm not going to do that. Well, daily meetings isn't necessarily for everyone. It doesn't necessarily work in everyone's schedule.
That's a good place to start,
But it's a good place to start. I said, I went to meetings every day for almost 2 years. Because that's what I needed to do. And it's like with anything else, if I'm doing something that is working and is keeping me sane and healthy, why would I stop doing it?
Right. And if you go long enough, even in today's, what some people would consider watered down 12-step meetings, still, I believe this. If you go long enough, you're going to start seeing that people have something you want, and you're going to wonder, how do I get that?
Right.
You may not do that in one meeting a week or one meeting period or whatever. You got to, this whole thing about 90 meetings in 90 days is much more about just doing a couple of things doesn't cement any kind of foundation. You got to get into kind of a habit of doing it. And you can't give something a fair shake in just a couple of tries.
Right.
So you got to start somewhere. I didn't go to one church service and say that's it. I don't like church now. I know.
Well, you mean you're not one of those ones that just goes once a week and checks the box?
No.
Or once a year?
I'm actually part of a step writing workshop class that I did in CR because if I was going to be a leader there, I needed to know that process.
Right.
Did I need to do steps 1 through 12 again? Not necessarily, but I needed to know how they did that to be a responsible leader. Now I can teach that class.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. People say, well, I'll just do this. Whatever it is. I believe them. I'm going to work my program. I believe you.
Or I'll do whatever my family's okay with me doing. It's like your family has to stay out of it. Because our families, we've messed up so much.
Yeah.
They're going to not give us the best advice, or it's going to be skewed in one way or another. Yeah. Either they're codependent, enabling, they care too much, they don't care enough, they're feeling guilty, or they just don't,
well,
give a rat.
And I would ask the guys that I worked with out at the Teen Challenge Center, I when they first get there, I'd say, what do you want? What do you want to do? And it was always put in different wording. It was always, I want the pain to stop. And so that's when we come into recovery fellowships and so forth. We want that. We don't really, a lot of times people don't count the cost with us, what that means. Well, in families, their answer is, I just want Johnny back. I just want my wife back. And they don't realize in order to get them back, you may have to be willing to let them go because they got work to do. That may not involve you.
Well, just to give Dennis Prager a little plug today.
Sure.
I was listening on the way in here, and he was talking about that with kids. You know, how there's unhappy kids, and it's like you gotta turn them loose.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta, teach them the right things, and then you gotta turn them loose and quit trying to make them feel happy or feel better about themselves. They gotta experience life.
My mom, when she was teaching me how to ride a bike, she had to let go of the bike. And I crashed, and I got up, and I crashed, and I got up. And then one time, she let go, and I didn't crash. But I had to crash.
Right.
To learn how to balance.
Right.
Listeners, don't misunderstand that you've got to relapse to learn how to balance. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
But you're going to go through pain. No pain, no gain.
Right.
To get the gain. Some of this stuff is painful. But to stay where you're at and be stagnant, particularly without the use of your old friend, whatever that medication was, that is 100 times worse.
Yeah, and also you think about it. I mean, anybody that's realistic and thinks about, their past. Maybe you're in it now, but if I look back, there was more pain in my day-to-day existence than there was spending that little bit of time working that step.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's all gone. I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
But I remember what it was like. I don't close the door on it.
Right.
But I don't sit there and dwell on it.
Right.
I'm done with it.
The morbid reflection is done.
Right. There's no pain.
In the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, right after the 5th step has been completed, it says this on page 75. It says, returning home, and you alluded to this, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. That's part of the directions. You just didn't talk to your sponsor, your priest, your rabbi, whoever. When you're done, you go home or you find a quiet place and you reflect on what just happened.
And what edition is that for our listeners out there?
This is the 3rd edition of the Big Book of AA.
Okay.
Page 75 in the chapter Into Action. And I think it's the same page on all the editions. Returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet. So there's 2 pieces of this, where we can be quiet and for an hour, not 30 minutes, an hour. So you find somewhere that's quiet. Maybe it's your back porch. Maybe it's your prayer closet. Maybe it's your room. Maybe it's on a mountaintop. Wherever it is where you're not going to be distracted. And for an hour, then it says, carefully reviewing what we have done. So that means you are going over in your mind and heart what you just experienced with that person you did that step with. You're thinking about what you shared. You're thinking about how that went. And then it says, and this is a prayer, we thank God. What does that mean? We're going to be talking to God. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. That's a promise from doing that step. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully, see, if you're going to go to a mountaintop, you may want to take this book with you. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, meaning the steps, we ask if we have omitted anything. And you experience the fact that you left some things out.
Yep.
Right? So he knows that our tendency is to do that, maybe intentionally, maybe unintentionally. That's why we have to review this. For we are building on an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? There he goes with construction terms again. Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? We got to go back and we got to review this. Some of this may be not done yet.
Right.
And so, oh man, I forgot about that. Then pick up the phone. Hey, Pastor Fred, you got a minute? I need to come back and talk to you, or sometime this week or whatever. But you got to review this stuff.
Yep, it's important.
It is absolutely vitally important.
And the one thing that I want to stress is you can't beat yourself up. You can't.
No, because this is perfectly natural.
don't let it derail you. Don't say, "Oh, I got to start over." It's like, no, you just stop what you're doing.
Right.
That's part of your 10th step that day. Even if you did your 5th step that day,
Right.
you know, that can be part of your 10th step for that end of that day or the next day, where you're addressing it as soon as it comes up.
Yeah, so if you've gone through the 12-step process and one day you realize years later, I totally forgot about this situation.
Right.
You don't got to go back to step 1 and do the steps all over again to go talk to somebody
Well,
about
I'm not even going to
this.
go back and do a 4th step.
Well, yeah, that's true.
I'm going to do a 10th
and,
step.
And here's the deal. But if you think you can get away with walking through life without dealing with that issue, you may not understand powerless. Maybe you need to go back and look at step 1.
Maybe.
And in that case, I get it, you know. But thoroughness, and you talked about moving on through this thing quickly. You know, at the end of step 3, when it's getting ready to move into step 4, it says, next, we launched. That's an Air Force term. It means 0 to 200 in a matter of seconds. It doesn't mean I got done with step 3 and now I'm going to wait a week.
I'll wait till the next time step 4 comes up as a topic in group.
Right. So you're moving through this thing rather quickly, you know. And I've known people that we lose them at the 4th step because they're writing a manuscript that's bigger than this desk. You know what I mean? They're not looking at the exact nature of their wrongs. They've got so many wrongs and never looking at the nature of them that God, if I wrote down, you know, every wrong I ever did and did not look at the nature of what was fueling those things, and I didn't confess those things, you could fill this room up. Right. And that's pretty scary. You don't want to go any further.
Well, and a lot of people, you know, including myself at one time, you have trust issues, right? And so you get to the 4th and 5th step, and you're like, yeah, I'm not going to leave any evidence, right, laying around. That's 1.
Sure.
And 2, I'm not going to tell anybody because I don't trust anybody.
Right.
Because the people that I've trusted have let me down. Okay, so maybe it isn't the people, it's because you're broken in the first place,
right?
And you picked the wrong people.
Yeah.
I went directly to someone that I knew that they couldn't like blab about it in group next week, right? And so I was confident that was the case, and it was, and so gave me more comfort to open up and talk about anything,
right?
And that's what I encourage others to do. I hear a lot of people say, "Well, I did it with my sponsor, I did it with my best friend." Okay, that's great, but you know,
are you following the directions?
If you're following the directions and you feel confident that that's, you know, it's going to remain there, then good for you. I don't necessarily put all my reliance in human beings.
Right.
Right.
So that's why it's threefold: God, myself, and another human being.
Right.
It doesn't say,
and you know why?
Human being, period.
You know the other reason why it's a 3-pronged process, because it is preparing you to trust and forgive. Because you actually, it's not just with one person,
right?
Or it's not just with God,
right?
Or yourself. You have to do it in three different situations.
Yeah.
So that gives you the courage to press on forward and do more and trust more and be able to be more open. Because doing it one time wouldn't necessarily help that process along, or it might not. It would be very slow process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And that just, it's one of those things God just threw at me right just a second.
Oh, it was one of those God flash moments.
Moments. It's like the first time I ever thought about it like that. But yeah, that's what it is.
That's where bumper stickers come from.
Yeah.
Prayer and meditations about communication. I'm not going to forget that for a while.
Wiggy, wig.
So some interesting responses to the question: Did your life change after doing a 5th step? If so, how and with whom did you do it? Bobby Z said, I was in an inpatient rehab and took steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. on my own. My sponsor was the only AA I ever knew, so I cornered him with my fifth. He was reluctant because I'd only been in rehab from jail for 6 weeks. So I'm thinking, he's thinking, okay, did you do it by the book or did you do it the way rehab had it? So maybe he was kind of questioning that. But I told him that I was going to follow the big book with or without him. It was like the weight of the world had been lifted off of me. So good deal. He was going to follow the directions.
Right.
Tony J said, yes, as I finally felt somewhat free, finally in years. I did it with my sponsor. And if you really break it down, you do it daily with others. Honesty is always the best policy. So as weird as it sounds, I try to do the fifth step all the time, as I used to lie a lot. I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone else, but in my crazy head it does. What do you think she means by that?
Tony, it's the 10th step.
Yeah, she's doing a 10th step. Right.
We love you.
Yeah. Semantics there, but that's what she's doing. Sabrina M said it was definitely eye-opening each time I did it. So she's had to go back and do it. Perhaps she's reflected on her time and she's forgotten something and she's gone back and done that. I did it with my sponsors, each sharing with me their wisdom. So grateful for the process, but for all the promises I needed to keep going, it was just the beginning. And then Flo G said, I've completed several during my 28 years. That seems a lot to me, but okay. Every time is a wonderful experience. I still have life changes, memories from my first one. Each have been with a sponsor. All have worked the steps and continued meetings and active participation in the 12-step program. I have been blessed each time. More will be revealed. Again, I think you're right. I think we're talking about a 10th step here. The good news with all these is it seems like that they are moving. They're not stagnant.
Yeah.
And we can get so complacent, and the Big Book talks about that. The NA Basic Text talks about complacency is the enemy of those of us with substantial clean time. If you rest on your laurels and you get stagnant, and for some people to help not become stagnant, they journal. I'm a journaling guy. It's great stuff. But one thing is for sure, if you're going to continue to grow and improve on your spiritual condition, because that's where people fall. They fail to improve upon their spiritual condition. You're going to find a place somewhere along the line where you're going to be working with other people. Maybe it's just an encouraging word during a devotional hour once a week. Maybe it's a Bible study. Maybe it's doing step work. Maybe it's sharing in a meeting. Maybe it's doing service work. But you can't be an island to yourself, can you, Dave? It just doesn't seem to work.
And I think what happens a lot of times with people with long-term recovery,
right,
is that life happens and we don't feel like we need to go to meetings 3 or 4 times a week and or work the steps on a daily basis. It's sometimes we get like you said, get complacent, and we need a reminder. And I think that's what happens sometimes when people go back and they do another 4th and 5th step, is because there's so much time between when they're actively doing the maintenance steps, if you will,
right,
that they feel like they need to get back on track.
Yeah. And this one, I just love this one. This is from Donald R. He lives in the Brownsville area. He said, yes, I remember it felt like I released all the pressure on the pressure cooker in my mind, body, and spirit. I did it with Doug, descendant of Jesse James. Doug was my sponsor too. And he was a descendant of Jesse James. We did the prayer to follow out in Crawfordsville, where everyone goes to swim. When they did the 5th step prayer. I have continued to grow and change ever since then. There you go. Then I had a greater spiritual experience being filled with the Holy Spirit. 3,500 people pouring out of a church in Tacoma. I was singing in tongues, scared my wife. My higher power has continued to pursue me as he promised and complete a good work in me since then. Thank you, Lord Jesus. It was the same place. It was a bridge out. I think he's talking about the same place, a covered bridge out in the Brownsville area. that I did this with James, Doug James, and I was holding a Bic lighter because it was dark, and we're reading out of the big book, right? And the thing is burning my thumb. And I said, Doug, it's burning my thumb. He goes, don't move your thumb. Finish the prayer. So he did the prayer. I did the prayer. We got on our knees. It talks about getting on your knees and doing the whole thing.
Right.
And that experience, I will never forget that. Out of all the things that I've done in my 12-step process in my early recovery, doing that 5th step with Doug probably stands out to me more than any. It was an amazing experience. And then he told me, all right, now we're going to go back to the Sankey Park Hut. I'm going to pour you a cup of coffee, and I'm going to leave you alone. And you're going to review this. And he had me do it. You're going to be there for an hour and blah, 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 blah. And yeah, there was stuff that didn't come to my mind. I didn't have on my 4th step. But it was kind of like I was fresh. I was like, I was ripe for the picking. And God was revealing things to me. And then I went back up to Doug's house and we talked again. That was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, it's going through that first part of it. It actually loosens up the chains and puts some grease on the hinges, so to speak. Opens up the door a crack and it gives us an opportunity to feel more comfortable in our own skin. As you're talking, I'm thinking about what this topic means and how this ties into what we're talking about. I'm looking at the scripture reference here. It's James 1:21. I encourage you to read starting at 19 down to however far you want to go, but like at least 25. The thing that caught my attention was this part here. If I can read this.
Yeah, go for it.
This ties in. This ties into God's word and also ties into the 12 steps because I tie them together because I believe God's word is in the 12 steps because it comes from the Bible, from the scripture, right?
Yep.
So what does 21 say? It says, so get rid of all the filth and evil in your lives and humbly accept the word God has planted in our hearts, for it is the power to save your souls. And 22 says, but don't just listen to God's word. You must do what it says. Otherwise, you're fooling yourselves. 23, if you listen to the word and don't obey, it's like glancing at your face in a mirror. 24, you see yourself, walk away, and forget what you look like. 25, but if you look carefully into the perfect law that sets you free, and if you do what it says and don't forget what you heard, then God will bless you for doing it. That's exactly what it means about going directly from the 5th step to the 6th step to the 7th step.
So if you read it and don't do it, what's that?
Right.
But the promise is if you do it, God will bless it.
Exactly.
That's an awesome promise.
The freedom and the serenity comes into place.
Right.
The spiritual freedom, that weight that's lifted off. I mean, that's, to me, that what the part I just read, I mean, that's all of it right there.
Yeah.
5th, 6th, and 7th. And then
there it is.
The reason why.
That's good stuff, Dave.
Yeah.
Well, we are out of time. This has been a really good topic. If you want to gain, you're probably going to experience some discomfort.
Ouch.
You just are.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, it sure beats the alternative, and I don't want to stay where I was living before.
Right.
All right, my brother. Well, thank you so much for another show.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
It's an awesome show.
I want to give a shout out to Beverly, my friend Beverly. She is an avid listener. She thinks you and I just rock. So I just want to tell you, Beverly,
you rock.
You rock even more. You get a cowbell. And just I'm going to tease.
Thanks for listening.
I'm going to tease one of our sponsors, Patrick LeBeau. He said, "Hey, you forgot to give me a shout out." Well, here you go, Patrick. Shout out.
Patrick!
All right, our closing song is entitled Jesus Rush, and it's by the Christian rock group Eden's Way. Visit their website at edenswayband.com. Here is Jesus Rush.
Don't need no drugs or alcohol. Just drop on your knees and pray with all your heart. Thank the Lord for what He did. The reason that He died is so we can live again. Don't be tempted by the fruit of another tree. The Bible speaks that one day He will come for you and me. What you need is a Jesus rush. What you need is a Jesus rush. So when your life is spun around, if you're searching for a high, it can only bring you down. Go to God and get relief. He'll give you the comfort. The shot is always free. Yeah. Don't be tempted by the fruit of another vine. Grab his arms around you and say, you'll always be mine. What you need? What you need is a Jesus rush. What you need is a Jesus rush. What you need is a Jesus rush. What you need is a Jesus Don't be tempted by the grass of another field. For the high that you've been searching for is Him, and He's for real. Come on! What you need is a Jesus rush. 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 What you need, what you need, what you need is Jesus rush. What you need, what you need is Jesus rush.
Jesus Rush by Eden's Way. You can visit their website at www.edenswayband.com. Until next time, this is the Monty Man along with Dave Fleming, reminding you that you are entitled to overcome.
This has been a broadcast of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.